I run into this every now and then, especially when I was first sort of going down this track of noticing that these diseases and so forth have become much more prevalent. And, this could be, and this was right around the time we fundamentally shifted away from meat and fat, because of the whole cholesterol scare. And so many people would say, well, this was probably happening in the same numbers. We just didn't notice it. We just didn't notice it was in the background. We didn't notice the autism. We didn't notice the dementia. We didn't notice the Crohn's and ulcerative colitis and all these sorts of things. Does that hold any water as an argument?
No, because these presentations are catastrophic. You just have to live a day in a person who suffers inflammatory bowel disease, even if it's a very mild inflammatory bowel disease, to know that these people suffer. They go to the toilet multiple times a day, they get abdominal pains, they have low quality of life, they get chronic fatigue, they bleed from their bowels. Some of them end up with catastrophic surgical procedures because their bowels block up. So to those doctors and health professionals that say, well, we just didn't notice it before, I call ignorance on that, and I call a lack of humility to the suffering of the population. I think there is no doubt in my mind, and it sounds like it's the same with you, that these diseases did not exist to the same scale as they did in this modern world. I think there's no doubt autoimmunity and autoimmune illnesses have existed in history. There's bones of an 8,000, 10,000 year old human that shows that rheumatoid arthritis was starting to become prevalent, in particular in the agricultural era. Interestingly, there is no rheumatoid arthritis noted in the fossil records prior to the advent of agriculture. Some might say, well, fossil records from back then are around. That's true, but so many things start occurring after agriculture: the diminishing of skull capacity, the deterioration of dentition, which we know is a sign of systemic inflammation. I think the fact that we as doctors and health professionals sometimes fail to acknowledge that the evolutionary pressures under which we have evolved for millions of years are probably the most suited to us, to exist in. But of course, in modern civilization, that's very difficult to do. So I've sort of gone off track there, Anthony. But to answer your question, I think these diseases, there's no doubt that statistically are becoming more common. I mean, for us to suggest that dementia wasn't picked up before, and that's why I wasn't diagnosed, I think does a disservice to those suffering dementia and to the family members affected with loved ones suffering dementia. It's an absolutely horrific illness, and I think we should be paying more attention to these rising rates.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, I think it's it just shows a bit of conceit, that anyone born before 1986 was just couldn't see, couldn't see a barn door in front of them. Obviously, these things are hugely detrimental, and then people will argue, well, people are only living to 36 and so forth, and so they just weren't getting to the age of dementia and so forth for these diseases to present. But of course, we know that's an average from birth, and that's only because there was infant mortality was so high, but actually people did live older, and we have a lot of. I mean, Socrates was in his 70s, and that was thousands of years ago. So. Marcus Aurelius and so forth, very, very famous, figures throughout history. We know that they lived to great ages, and we don't, they weren't in, old folks' homes and so forth.